let's be real. As much as I enjoyed doing Halloween Mania, keep in mind, this is also on the same levels of doing it in the most painful ways, just like doing that Christmas schedule that I did last year. Mainly Lonely's 25 Days of Christmas. I'm just gonna say this right now that I was planning on reviewing this episode, but then I thinked about it by not doing it, only for doing it at the last minute. Most of these videos are mainly doing it at the last minute. The main plot of this episode is that Ash needs to get a ghost-type Pokemon in order to go against his next Gym Leader battle, since that he was unable to succeed without a ghost-type Pokemon. In all honesty, when memoing this episode, the only thing I think about was the tower itself, which is literally the main focus of the entire episode, sure, but in the context of this episode, it's mainly Ash just trying to get a ghost-type Pokemon in order to use it to go against his current gym leader. And that Pokemon that he's searching for is Haunter, which his encounter with him is him getting messed at while also being terrified, because Haunter's motivation in this episode is mainly messing with people, because that's basically what he does as a ghost-type Pokemon. And with this being taking place in the first generation of Pokemon, they really want to make these types of Pokemon a lot more unique instead of just being, well, Pokemon in the video games. Team Rocket in this episode, since that they always do the thing in every other episode, get into shenanigans, but mainly Ghastly being a nuisance, not really a nuisance, but really terrifying Meowth, which causes Meowth to scratch Jesse's face. Believe me when I say this, I remember this episode a lot more, to the point that the more I remember these scenes, the more I realize of how relatable these characters are. Maybe it's the fact that my childhood got the better of me, that I was too obsessed with the minor details, that it just made me more distracted than the main aspects of this episode. Though that's mainly the fact that I watched the newest seasons of Pokemon rather than rewatching the old seasons, because there was a huge difference between the earlier seasons and the later seasons for how time has changed Pokemon, especially since that Ash is no longer the protagonist. Anyway, what I mean about the people who worked on this show were making the Pokemon a lot more different in comparison to the games, which what I mean is mainly by character. It's how Haunter and the other Pokemon are portrayed on being really happy and just enjoying themselves by terrifying other people. And considering that they are a lot more happy with Ash and Pikachu on their sides when they turn them into ghosts, they literally enjoy Ash to the point that if Ash kept Haunter after the following episode, there would have been a lot more involving this, but considering that maybe this is the only time where Ash and Pikachu will turn into ghosts, maybe it's mainly the fact that they just want to make the Pokemon universe a lot more expansive, but also a lot more childlike friendly. And even though that the first season of Pokemon may be for kids, it's always humble beginnings, no matter what show it is. Like, the amount of times I've watched this episode along with the other following episodes on VHS, the more I realize of how this episode was really entertaining as a Pokemon fan, but when you're no longer a Pokemon fan and looking at this episode now, there's a lot more going on than just shenanigans going all over the place. The dining room is a perfect example of what I feel about the earlier seasons of this show, and knowing how I barely watched the majority of the Generation series of Pokemon when it comes to anime, and mostly played the games up until Generation 6. These episodes were anything but filler, mainly the fact that back in the day, it was being its own thing, knowing full well that they're trying to elevate the Pokemon brand, but enough of that, let's get back into the episode itself. When Hato took the souls out of Ash and Pikachu, it's mainly the fact that they went too far with the lamp landing on top of Ash and Pikachu. Granted, it's not on top, it completely crashed on Ash and Pikachu, but you know what I mean. And if it is true that this is the only episode where the main characters are turned into ghosts, maybe it really shows that they really wanted to make this episode focusing on what it's like on having a ghost-type Pokemon when it's helpful. And when it came to the other Pokemon that Ash had as the series progressed, it's always a different bond when it comes to those types of Pokemon. But in the case of Hato, who only is with Ash up until the following episode, they either just want to use Hato for the advantage that Ash has in the following episodes, but then again, I also remember my nostalgia of watching the following episodes for how weirdly the outcome was when it comes to the gym battle itself. Believe me when I say this, at times this show can be goofy, but at times it can also be really off-putting when it comes to the way Ash wins a gym leader contest, especially when it came to the grass-type gym leader, which, in all honesty, the less said about that, the better. To tell you the truth, if they took the route of having Ash keeping his ghost-type Pokemon, then maybe there would have been a different direction, but at the same time, they probably didn't want the protagonist to have a ghost-type Pokemon because it just doesn't suit for the protagonist, mainly when it came to the humble beginnings of Pokemon. Granted, diehard Pokemon fans may disagree, but at the same time, the ex-diehard Pokemon fans who gave up on the series, mainly who watched the series back in the 1990s, and I do mean back in the 1990s, maybe it's literally the fact that they probably see this show a lot more differently when it comes to Ash's character, considering that he doesn't appeal at all in the games, aside from one game, which was the N64 puzzle game. The point of this review is mainly the fact that this is the first time I'm reviewing a Pokemon episode in a while the other Pokemon episode review that I did a review on was copyrighted, and since that I put my focus on the movies, they were a lot more different in comparison to the episodes. Yes, the episodes and movie are canon, but for me personally, whenever I think about the episodes, they're not the type of episodes that are the same as the cartoon episodes that I talk about over the years. Which explains onto why I haven't gone back into Pokemon, nor the anime itself. Granted, the video games may be a different story, but this episode just gave me the impression that there's a lot more going on, and a lot more different than they were upon growing up. So, I found this episode interesting and somewhat unique, but when it comes to enjoyable, it just isn't the same that I had during my childhood. So, like, the only enjoyment that I got is when Ash mistakes Jessie as a Pokemon, which leads to Charmander doing Flamethrower on Jessie, while also Ash throwing a Pokeball at her face. Even if my sense of humor has gone away, I have to admit that this was still hilarious to think about, even if you're not that into the humor upon rewatching it after many years. The only thing I'm hoping when it comes to Halloween Miracles, if there are that Halloween Miracles, is I hope that this video doesn't get copyrighted, unlike the last Pokemon review that I did involving an episode. I'm not sure how long that's going to take, but at the same time, it better be slightly avoidable at all costs. I'm giving this episode a 6 out of 10.